Let me start with a riddle. If medicines, drugs, and vaccines save lives, why do so many people dislike, distrust, and even hate pharma companies?
No, 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 no.
And this is what we are going to be looking at today. If you are a pharma founder or a CEO of a pharma or biotech company, we're going to be looking at how you can manage public perception in your pharmaceuticals and biotechnology research business. If this is the first time you're on this channel, subscribe, click the bell icon and select all notifications so that all future videos that I produce that will give you tips and techniques on how to boost your business, you will receive them. Hi, my name is James Pereira and I'm the founder of the Pharma Accelerator as well as this channel, the Pharma Founders Academy. Now let's just rewind a few months ago to the end of 2024 up to about a few months ago, where people took the law into their hands and acted out violently against those that they felt had been treating them unjustly. And we saw the murder of the United Health CEO and also someone who entered a pharmacy and attacked one of the employees for whatever disgruntled reasons that they had. Now, no doubt those who were attacked were not technically the pharmaceutical industry or biotechnology research, but they were part of the ecosystem. In this short video, I'll be going through with you the 5 reasons why people distrust or dislike pharma companies and the 8 solutions that exist for you to create trust among your stakeholders. Now, first of all, the first reason why people distrust pharma companies is pricing and access to medications. So high on the list of this would be high drug prices. Now, studies have shown, and this is more than 20 years ago, that it costs about $1 billion to bring a drug to market, drug discovery as well as clinical trial costs. And patents are only for 20 years. So you need to recoup your investment pretty fast, because by the time you get regulatory approval in the first country, you will probably have about 10 years left if you are lucky. Or if you're unlucky, you just have 5 years. So that's one of the reasons why pharma companies say that they need to have high drug prices to recoup their costs. Second thing is price gouging. Now, we have all heard about some pharma companies who have resorted to just increasing the price, sometimes overnight, for no known reason whatsoever. It's not that the ingredient prices have gone up or there is a shortage of ingredients, but they just raise the price. Sometimes it's not just single-digit price increases, which is quite the norm in most pharma companies. But this could be 2x or even 3x. And thirdly is patent abuse. We have also heard of how some pharma companies could reformulate their drugs so that there are minute changes and therefore they get an extension to the patent for another 5 years or so. It is justified if, for example, if your original formulation was to be taken 3 times a day or twice a day, and you have reformulated it so that your patient just needs to take it once a day. That's a huge impact on compliance and adherence to medications, especially if patients are indisciplined, like I am, where even sometimes BD and TDS doses, even BD doses, I struggle to adhere to. So imagine if it's TDS. So those are genuine improvements. But there are cases where the cost benefit really doesn't justify the extension of the patent. And usually when there's a reformulation, there's also a price increase. Now, reason number 2 is marketing practices. And who hasn't heard of these unethical or questionable marketing practices? And again, here, I think what most comes to mind are TV ads, where there are slick advertisements that are created and it is targeted to patients. So it creates an emotion rather than educating the patient, so that the patient goes to the clinic, meets their healthcare provider, and requests for specific drugs. We all have heard about the case of sildenafil when it was first launched. So people who did not need it were requesting their doctors to prescribe it for them for other activities rather than for the real indication. One of the studies that I just saw indicated that up to $720 million was spent by the top 10 pharma companies or the top 10 brands in the US on TV ads in quarter 1 of this year. So that's a huge amount of money. And of course, now there is a movement. A couple of senators in the US have decided that they want to create legislation to ban direct to consumer ads. Maybe a good move. Now, we have also heard about recently Maine Pharma, where the FDA has censured them for misleading ads. And Sanofi has also come into trouble with the UK authorities for sponsoring UK patients to the Olympics last year. So the question is, why are you sponsoring patients to the Olympics? And Pfizer's old COVID-19 claims are being recirculated by their employees, and this has got them into trouble as well. Next, among unethical marketing practices is the practice of gifting and rewarding healthcare providers who are high prescribers. And this could involve sponsoring them to attend events and also shares in the company. And there have been cases of huge funding for clinical trials that researchers are conducting. Now, obviously, these are going to influence the healthcare professional, and there's no question about it. In this book, Robert Cialdini years ago had already indicated that the principle of reciprocity, the give and take principle, when you reward someone, they are obliged to pay back. Now, reason number 3 why people distrust pharma companies are the lame R&D that many of them do. So this would mean that the companies that are conducting R&D are just focusing on profitable drugs. And we know the profitable categories: cardiovascular disease, oncology, diabetes. These are all big bucks diseases, and these are lifestyle diseases that occur in wealthy countries much more than in other countries, and therefore this is where the innovations are coming up. So there is an overemphasis or overfocus on diseases that affect wealthy countries rather than, let's say, orphan diseases or diseases that impact lower income countries. We have all heard about the research or innovations into malaria drugs. There is not much happening there. And the other criticism is also a lack of really groundbreaking treatments. Most of the treatments are minute innovations that are not really groundbreaking. It's only once in a while that we do find some of these groundbreaking treatments, like, for example, GLP-1 or sildenafil. These are all few and far in between. Now, I must point out that in my discussions with many pharma founders, I find that some of these pharma founders have stumbled upon some really great innovations that are mind-blowing, that are going to transform certain diseases, the treatment of certain diseases, and they're going to impact patients' lives tremendously. So kudos to these pharma founders who have discovered this. Reason number 4 is questionable ethics. Now, what do questionable ethics mean? Number 1 is clinical trial conduct. Now, sometimes what happens is that clinical trials are conducted in countries where there are not so stringent oversight, and it's easier to get ethics committee approval, and therefore to get the clinical trials conducted easily and faster as well. Now, there are legitimate reasons why you would be conducting clinical trials in third world countries. And that could be because the drug that you are investigating is applicable to those economies where the disease is prevalent in those economies, not in the wealthier nation. Another common ethics issue that crops up is that the criticism that clinical trials sometimes are not very transparent. If the trials are bad, it is not published or is hidden, or even the data is suppressed or the statistics are massaged. And we all know how we can use statistics to make your drug look great when it is not really so, because of the clinical trial methodology. And therefore, there's been a movement to create this repository of clinical trials. It's a good move. It's not mandatory still. And there are several of these around. So it would be great if this could be made mandatory so that every clinical trial needs to be included into this repository in order for them to gain regulatory approval. Another point is rewarding researchers. We all have heard how some of the top pharma companies have given shares to the researchers after they have conducted trials. Now, although the clinical researcher could include this as a disclaimer in their clinical trial, but it still has this nagging feel. How transparent were you? How unbiased were you while you were reporting this? That would be this issue of suppressing data. And we have heard about the vision loss with GLP-1. This was from one practitioner's observation, and it eventually went up to the European regulators to insist that Novo Nordisk add this into the prescribing information. The question is, how much did Novo Nordisk know about this? Now, the fifth and final reason why people distrust and dislike pharma companies is because of regulatory and legal issues. We all know that there is a tremendous amount of lobbying that goes on to exert political influence, regulatory influence, and legislators being lobbied to create legislation that would favor pharma companies or make things easier for them. And when I was in Sanofi way back in 2003, we had to take a course on how to lobby the regulatory authorities. And it came in handy at that time because we were trying to get one of our vaccines into the National Immunization Scheme. Who hasn't heard of legal settlements where top pharma companies do not want court cases to proceed because the dirt would come out, and therefore they settle it out of court? And you may have watched the latest Netflix documentary on Tylenol and how they have raised the suspicion that maybe the recall of Tylenol way back in the 80s was more to protect the company that manufactured Tylenol and to prevent these samples from landing in the hands of regulators for them to conduct investigations. So now let's have a look at the 8 solutions and how you can gain or regain trust with patients, healthcare providers, and regulatory authorities. Now, solution number 1 is, of course, ethical pricing and access to medication. And top on the list is a fair pricing model. Now, a fair pricing model doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a cost plus model. It can be anything that makes your medication affordable to the majority of people. Now, you must understand that not every country has got a reimbursement scheme. Now, one of the clients that I work with, a pharma client of mine, now they have a fair pricing model for one of their drugs, their mental health drugs. Now, this drug has got 2 doses, 10 milligram and a 20 milligram. Every patient has to start off with a 10 milligram, and the optimum dose is 20 milligram, and it has to be titrated up, I think, over 4 weeks or something of that sort. In the old model, what most companies used to do was there was a price differential between the 10 and the 20 milligram. Now, this client of mine makes the price the same, 10 mg and 20 mg, which means it doesn't create a reason for the healthcare provider to stick at the low level because the higher dose is the optimal dose. And therefore, they are encouraged to go up to the 20 milligram. Now, no doubt with 20 milligram, there would be higher incidence of, but the price reason is totally removed from titrating upwards to the optimal dose. The second thing is, in order to make medicines accessible, when your patent expires, your business model may not necessarily be manufacturing generics. And what you can do is license them out to companies that do manufacture generics. And therefore, you can focus on your newer drugs, newer brands, and put all your marketing focus on that. Solution number two is responsible marketing. And how do we do that? One is transparent communication. Be transparent when you are communicating your drug's benefits and also the side effects and contraindications to patients and to the healthcare providers or anybody else as well who are involved. And therefore, your marketing material that you produce has to be as accurate as possible. Next is avoid conflicts of interest. And that would mean do not reward your prescribers, do not reward your clinical researchers with outlandish rewards, i.e., shares in your organization, get them to buy. Do not dish it out. And when you sponsor people to events, make sure you rotate it rather than just the highest prescriber every year. Now, solution number three is meaningful innovation. And that would mean you prioritize genuine, innovative treatment. And that could mean meeting unmet medical needs, rare diseases, as well as diseases that impact lower income regions. So forego the short term high profits and go for the long term lower profits. Now, meaningful innovation could also mean that you collaborate with other organizations that have the expertise. Now, with AI out there, there are many companies that are providing AI drug discovery. And you may not have the expertise to invest in AI platforms or even to employ someone who is an expert in using AI for drug discovery. So collaborate. It's going to be a lot cheaper for you as well. And secondly, utilizing AI and digital tools for clinical research because it will shorten your clinical trial period and it will help you commercialize your drug a lot faster. And your costs are also going to be a lot lower. Today, one of the examples that I can think of is digital twins, using digital twins in clinical trials to speed up your clinical trials. Solution number four is ethical and transparent clinical trials. And that would involve having high ethical standards where you look at patient safety as number one, informed consent from the patients, where you are very transparent and inform them of all potential safety issues, side effects, contraindications, make it known way before the trial, and proper regulatory compliance as well. Now, in terms of transparency, make sure that your clinical trials is included into the repository because that will increase the trust factor for your company. Solution number five is corporate governance and compliance. And the way you do that is via strong governance. And that would involve creating frameworks for ethical decision making and holding people accountable. So every leader needs to be trained on how to hold people accountable. One of the failures that I see very common among leaders is not knowing how to hold people accountable. And therefore, they just do not have that discipline and just let it go. Next is you need to have clear policies on compliance, risk management, and ethical conduct, and hold your people to it. And of course, the third is regulatory compliance. Just make sure that your entire organization complies with all regulatory requirements. Now, solution number six is public health and social responsibility. Now, this would mean address public health needs wherever possible. And secondly, is to have a patient-centered approach so that everything that you do is to have the best interests of the patient in mind, whether it is in drug discovery, clinical trials, marketing practices, supply chain, the whole works has to be geared towards the patient. And this is where you need a mindset where you got to shift from the old mentality of focusing on the healthcare provider. Is no longer customer centric, but patient centricity is the way to go. Solution number seven is transparency and communication. So how you communicate is going to reveal your philosophy, the values that you and your company hold to. And how do you achieve that? By open communication. And you do that by fostering transparency in your company's practices, in your decision-making processes, as well as your product information being openly shared with the public. Next is community engagement. Now, very often when you're going through this drug discovery or clinical trials or marketing, the patients are usually left out of the equation. All the focus is on the regulatory authorities and the healthcare providers. It's probably time for you to consider thinking about involving patients into the process. Now, when you get input from your patients, the quality of the input is far more powerful than what you probably would get from the healthcare providers and from regulatory authorities.
Wow!
Because it's the patients who are ultimately using your product. So might as well turn to them to get your input. Solution number 8 is sustainable practices. And I'm not talking about climate change or anything of that sort at all here, but look at the long-term vision rather than short-term. And this would mean you invest in your R&D and don't dilute yourself. Pick one area and focus on it. Secondly, invest in your people because your people are the ones who are going to make your company sustainable. So invest in them, develop them. Third is community support. And one company that I want to highlight here is Estelas, which has been on this project of getting patients in touch with advocacy groups for the conditions that these patients are suffering from. And that's a great way to help patients and relieve the pressure from the healthcare providers who may not have the time to educate and counsel the patients. Now, another way that you can take the sustainable practice route is by being environmentally responsible. And the way that you can do this is to ensure that you digitalize every aspect of your operation wherever possible. And one of the main areas where you can achieve this is in your supply chain, especially within packaging. And there are companies today that provide services to pharma companies to help them source for sustainably responsible packaging. And some of these companies help you move away from plastic packaging to paper-based packaging. So I hope in this short video, you have discovered that it is possible to indeed build a pharma business that people trust and love. Now, I prepared an infographic of the 8 ways, the 8 techniques that you can use to build trust among your stakeholders. And you can click the link below to download this for free. I hope you got some value from this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.